6, 5, 4, 3. Ignition. 3, 2, 1. 0. Roger. Liftoff. Liftoff. The Fox is away.
This is your Colbycast, a weekly roundup of news from the Colbyjack.net world headquarters, flavored with a healthy dose of fiction. Push the button. Welcome to Colbycast 28 for June 22nd, 2011. This is Bob, known as R.L. Ferguson among the Oompa Loompa tribes of Outer Get-Outta-Here-istan. Quick update on last week's revelations about Mary, or Marydo for short. My 11-year-old German Shepherd Husky who was diagnosed with diabetes. First, she is not liking being told when to eat. Definitely facing a bit of resistance there. We were making meals for her, but if she kept refusing to eat them, we were forced to start her on a diabetic dog food. Damn, that stuff's not cheap. But it doesn't go bad if she doesn't eat it. To be honest, today she refused to eat, and incredibly enough, so did Colbyjack. I think they're going on strike. We just have to wait it out. As my wife and I control the food, I am sure this evening we'll find a change of attitude. Second, Marydo had her first follow-up glucose test, and the vet assistants could not get a vein to pop. It sucked. Both forearms and her leg. They ended up calling the vet in, who took a bit of time finding the right spot. Silly dog seems to be clenching up in the presence of needles. The results from the test were immediate, though. She had fallen from mid-400s to the mid-200s with only 9 cc's of insulin given twice a day. The vet increased her dose to 10 cc's, and we'll test her again next week. Let's hope we find the veins this time. Fun and games all around. What was that? The interview? No clue, not a word. Okay, for those of you who didn't join us last week, I sat an interview for an actuary position that I'd really like to have. It's exciting, it has lots of data to handle, there's fun programming to do, there's lots of data to handle, there's wonderful people at the workspace, did I say there's wonderful data to handle? Oh yeah. So anyway, I sat for a position, had about a 4-hour interview with 5 different individuals, and now I'm sitting on my hands waiting. Basically, at this point, I just have to live my life like I never sat the interview. We might have an answer for the next Colbycast. Hopefully it's positive. What else? I changed my workspace from a sitting desk to a standing desk. This isn't the first time that I've done this. Truth be told, I've been alternating between sitting and standing over the course of the last year. So what prompted this iteration? Truth be told, I needed to clean my desk off. My desk is actually a 4-foot-long folding table, and would you believe it, but I found 7 spoons buried upon its surface. 7 spoons. Gee, my wife was wondering why we never had enough spoons. Now she knows. The conversion was easy, aided by the fact that my computer and monitor reside on a wire kitchen rack with shelves set for monitors at top and monitors at seat height. I bring the table up to height through the use of 2 milk crates per side and about a dozen zip strips to secure the whole mess. Am I more productive like they say in the blogs? Well, I haven't felt productive for a while, so I think I'd have to say a qualified maybe. All I know is I don't feel as tired at the end of a long day wasting time at my workstation. At least my leg and stomach muscles get a workout while I stand around reading Boing Boing. Yes, Boing Boing, the home of "Your chair is going to kill you" and other famous memes. Check them out. They've got some wonderful information about how you too can change your desk to a standing position if you wish. But the other thing, the second thing, I think the big thing that got me back into the standing workstation was my interview. The two data engineers that I interviewed with both use standing desks, and I realized that if I were to get that position, I too would want one. So, I'm treating this as a practice, a workout, a preparation for a future job. And if I don't get it, hey, at least my desk is in the standing position and my legs are getting exercise. What's that? Why am I covering personal matters and not talking about Colbyjack.net news? Simple, there isn't much. Once again, we are doing the grunt work behind the scenes that make the wonderment of Colbyjack.net a reality. While sharing horrible details about sore throats and recording sessions with a half dozen voice changes and a dozen lines is fun, it isn't the sort of thing one wishes to talk about week after week. The quick and the dirty. Mouse Queen re-records are done. Just a matter of mastering, soundtracking, and the placement of bumpers, and they'll be finished. Looks like about 15 more hours of work, and that one will be gone. Not too bad. I currently am planning on recording For the Win by Cory Doctorow completely before I start finalizing the Mouse Queen. Give myself a little break from the Mouse Queen. Both the Mouse Queen and For the Win will premiere during the week of August 1 as part of our relaunch. At that time, we will purge our backlist of the original Mouse Queen as well as These Are Mine. Don't worry, These Are Mine is being redone, repackaged, and extended as part of the Dead Queen Ascending storyline. What's this? Mike, the audio engineer, just handed me a bulletin. There is breaking news about Captain Bear. For those of you who missed previous Colbycast, Captain Bear has been vanished from the air following his last appearance because of vandalism and theft. He damaged the studio's flux capacitor, stole the studio's spin dizzy drive, and lifted our entire supply of booster spice. Captain Bear also attempted to start a swearing bear meme. When confronted with these charges, he responded by ordering sushi. His attitude forced us to incarcerate him in the Horcrux storage facility beneath the Colbyjack studios. This paper in my hand details his daring escape. Right here, this paper. While details are sketchy, what we have is this. Earlier today, a mouse boy, bearing a surprising resemblance to Mr. Mouse, brought refreshments to the guards. As their memories end there, and toxicology reports indicate the presence of roofies, we must conjecture that the refreshments were laced with an illegal substance. Captain Bear and Mr. Mouse are now on the Colbyjack.net most wanted list. If you see a pompous bear and a wisecracking mouse, do not approach. Alert the authorities immediately. They are very dangerous to your sanity. You have been warned. Now back to our regularly scheduled program. In case you've been living under a rock, Death of a Shady Dame is the story currently coming out every Monday and Friday. It is a tale of murder, goats, and thievery in a small central Wisconsin town. With 10 episodes left, it is the perfect time to reach into the back catalog and get caught up. Death of a Shady Dame will finish its run on July 18th. When Death of a Shady Dame concludes, we'll follow it up with The Nut Heist, which will run for 3 days. The Nut Heist is a tale of squirrels, chipmunks, and an evil villain who likes nuts. This will be our last story before the relaunch. Recording will start this week if all goes well. Actually, to be perfectly honest, The Nut Heist will begin recording as soon as I perform the final pass edit. Yes, Patricia is sitting on her hands waiting for me to finish this thing. So if I get off my butt and start reading, we should have it edited and ready to fly by Thursday, June 23rd. Then Patricia has nearly a month to perfect her craft. Lastly, Nightmare is just beginning its editing phase. Nightmare is the tale of a woman trying to stop the perfect serial killer that only she can detect. Nightmare will debut on Halloween. Enough news for now, on to the story. About the author. Randall Garrett was a prolific contributor to Astounding and other science fiction magazines of the 1950s and 60s. He instructed Robert Silverberg in the techniques of selling large quantities of action-adventure science fiction and collaborated with him on 2 novels about Earth bringing civilization to an alien planet. Garrett is best known for his Lord Darcy books, the novel Too Many Magicians, and 2 short story collections. Set in an alternate world where a joint Anglo-French empire led by a Plantagenet dynasty has survived into the 20th century, and a world where magic works and has been scientifically codified. The Eyes Have It is the first of the Lord Darcy tales. It originally appeared in Analog Science, Fact, and Fiction in January of 1964, and was made available thanks to Project Gutenberg. This is part 3 of a 3-part series. Part 1 can be found in Colbycast 26, and part 2 in Colbycast 27. So, let's journey back to the days of Never When in the lands of Never Where with the 3rd and final installment of The Eyes Have It by Randall Garrett. The Eyes Have It by Randall Garrett, Part 3. The Count d'Evreux has been found dead in his chambers by his privy secretary, Sir Pierre. Dead from a gunshot to the chest. The Duke of Normandy, His Highness Sir Richard, has ordered Sir Darcy to investigate. Sir Darcy arrives with 2 companions, a doctor by the name of Dr. Paddley, and a licensed sorcerer by the name of Sean O'Loughlin. They had just begun their investigation when Sir Darcy discovered a strange arabesque diamond button. Sir Pierre believes he might know where the button came from. Sir Pierre recovers a key from the deceased Count d'Evreux and bids Sir Darcy to follow into a hidden closet filled with fine women's clothing, including one piece with a missing button. During their investigations, they also find a small, finely made handgun with engravings marking it as of Scottish origin. After verifying the gun fired the bullet and the button belonged to the dress through the magics of Sean O'Loughlin, Lord Darcy arranges for tea with the Laird and Lady Duncan. A tea he plans to be late for. While the Duncans wait at tea, Lord Darcy and Master Sean discover that not only is Laird Duncan involved in black magic, but he also owns a holster that matches the murder weapon. The Eyes Have It by Randall Garrett, Part 3. Father Bright felt as though he had been walking a tightrope for hours. Laird and Lady Duncan had been talking in low, controlled voices that betrayed an inner nervousness. But Father Bright realized that he and the Countess had been doing the same thing. The Duncan of Duncan had offered his condolences on the death of the late Count with the proper air of suppressed sorrow, as had Mary, Lady Duncan. The Countess had accepted them solemnly and with gratitude. But Father Bright was well aware that no one in the room, possibly, he thought, no one in the world, regretted the Count's passing. Laird Duncan sat in his wheelchair, his sharp Scots features set in a sad smile that showed an intent to be affable, even though great sorrow weighed heavily upon him. Father Bright noticed it and realized that his own face had the same sort of expression. No one was fooling anyone else. Of that the priest was certain. But for anyone to admit it would be the most boorish breach of etiquette. But there was a haggardness, a look of increased age about the laird's countenance that Father Bright did not like. His priestly intuition told him clearly that there was a turmoil of emotion in the Scotsman's mind that was, well, evil was the only word for it. Lady Duncan was, for the most part, silent. In the past 15 minutes, since she and her husband had come to the informal tea, she had spoken scarcely a dozen words. Her face was mask-like, but there was the same look of haggardness about her eyes as there was in her husband's face. But the priest's emphatic sense told him that the emotion here was fear, simple and direct. His keen eyes had noticed that she wore a shade too much makeup. She had almost succeeded in covering up the faint bruise on her right cheek, but not completely. My lady, the Countess d'Evreux, was all sadness and unhappiness, but there was neither fear nor evil there. She smiled politely and talked quietly. Father Bright would have been willing to bet that not one of the four of them would remember a word that had been spoken. Father Bright had placed his chair so that he could keep an eye on the open doorway and the long hall that led in from the great keep. He hoped Lord Darcy would hurry. Neither of the guests had been told that the Duke's investigator was here, and Father Bright was just a little apprehensive about the meeting. The Duncans had not even been told that the Count's death had been murder, but he was certain that they knew. Father Bright saw Lord Darcy come in through the door at the far end of the hall. He murmured a polite excuse and rose. The other three accepted his excuses with the same politeness and went on with their talk. Father Bright met Lord Darcy in the hall. "Did you find what you were looking for, Lord Darcy?" the priest asked in a low tone. "Yes," Lord Darcy said. "I am afraid we shall have to arrest Laird Duncan." "Murder?" "Perhaps. I am not yet certain of that, but the charge will be black magic. He has all the paraphernalia in a chest in his room. Master Sean reports that a ritual was enacted in the bedroom last night. Of course, that's out of my jurisdiction. You, as a representative of the church, will have to be the arresting officer." He paused. "You don't seem surprised, Reverence." "I'm not," Father Bright admitted. I felt it. You and Master Sean will have to make out a sworn deposition before I can act." "I understand. Can you do me a favor?" "If I can." "Get my lady the Countess out of the room on some pretext or other. Leave me alone with her guests. I do not wish to upset my lady any more than absolutely necessary." "I think I can do that. Shall we go in together?" "Why not? But don't mention why I am here. Let them assume I am just another guest." "Very well." All three occupants of the room glanced up as Father Bright came in with Lord Darcy. The introductions were made. Lord Darcy humbly begged the pardon of his hostess for his lateness. Father Bright noticed the same sad smile on Lord Darcy's handsome face as the others were wearing. Lord Darcy helped himself from the buffet table and allowed the Countess to pour him a large cup of hot tea. He mentioned nothing about the recent death. Instead, he turned the conversation toward the wild beauty of Scotland and the excellence of the grouse shooting there. Father Bright had not sat down again. Instead, he left the room once more. When he returned, he went directly to the Countess and said, in a low but clearly audible voice, "My lady, Sir Pierre Marlet has informed me that there are a few matters that require your attention immediately. It will require only a few moments." My lady, the Countess, did not hesitate, but made her excuses immediately. "Do finish your tea," she added. "I don't think I shall be long." Lord Darcy knew the priest would not lie, and he wondered what sort of arrangement had been made with Sir Pierre. Not that it mattered, except that Lord Darcy had hoped it would be sufficiently involved for it to keep the Countess busy for at least 10 minutes. The conversation, interrupted but momentarily, returned to grouse. "I haven't done any shooting since my accident," said Laird Duncan, "but I used to enjoy it immensely. I still have friends up every year for the season." "What sort of weapon do you prefer for grouse?" Lord Darcy asked. "A 1-inch bore with a modified choke," said the Scot. "I have a pair that I favor. Excellent weapons." "Of Scottish make?" No, English. Your London gunsmiths can't be beat for shotguns. "Oh, I thought perhaps your lordship had had all your guns made in Scotland." As he spoke, he took the little pistol out of his coat pocket and put it carefully on the table. There was a sudden silence. Then Laird Duncan said in an angry voice, "What is this? Where did you get that?" Lord Darcy glanced at Lady Duncan, who had turned pale. "Perhaps," he said coolly, "Lady Duncan can tell us." She shook her head and gasped. For a moment, she had trouble in forming words or finding her voice. Finally, No, I know nothing. Nothing." But Laird Duncan looked at her oddly. "You do not deny that this is your gun, my lord?" Lord Darcy asked. "Or your wife's, as the case may be." "Where did you get it?" There was a dangerous quality in the Scotsman's voice. He had once been a powerful man, and Lord Darcy could see his shoulder muscles bunching. "From the late Count Devereux's bedroom." "What was it doing there?" There was a snarl in the Scot's voice, but Lord Darcy had the feeling that the question was as much directed toward Lady Duncan as it was to himself. "One of the things it was doing there was shooting Count Devereux through the heart." Lady Duncan slumped forward in a dead faint, overturning her teacup. Laird Duncan made a grab at the gun, ignoring his wife. Lord Darcy's hand snaked out and picked up the weapon before the Scot could touch it. No, my lord," he said mildly. "This is evidence in a murder case. We mustn't tamper with the king's evidence." He wasn't prepared for what happened next. Laird Duncan roared something obscene in Scots Gaelic, put his hands on the arms of his wheelchair, and with a great thrust of his powerful arms and shoulders, shoved himself up and forward, toward Lord Darcy, across the table from him. His arm swung up toward Lord Darcy's throat as the momentum of his body carried him toward the investigator. He might have made it, but the weakness of his legs betrayed him. His waist struck the edge of the massive oaken table, and most of his forward momentum was lost. He collapsed forward, his hand still grasping toward the surprised Englishman. His chin came down hard on the tabletop. Then he slid back, taking the tablecloth and the china and silverware with him. He lay unmoving on the floor. His wife did not even stir except when the tablecloth tugged at her head. Lord Darcy had jumped back, overturning his chair. He stood on his feet, looking at the two unconscious forms. "I don't think there's any permanent damage done to either," said Dr. Patterley an hour later. "Lady Duncan has suffered from shock, of course, but Father Bright brought her round in a hurry. She's a devout woman, I think, even if a sinful one." "What about Laird Duncan?" Lord Darcy asked. "Well, that's a different matter. I'm afraid his back injury was aggravated, and that crack on the chin didn't do him any good. I don't know whether Father Bright can help him or not. Healing takes the cooperation of the patient. I did all I could for him, but I'm just a chirurgeon, not a practitioner of the healing art. Father Bright has quite a good reputation in that line, however, and he may be able to do his lordship some good." Master Sean shook his head dolefully. "His reverence has the talent. There is no doubt of that. But now he's pitted against another man who has it. A man whose mind is bent on self-destruction in the long run." "Well, that's none of my affair," said Dr. Patterley. "I'm just a technician. I leave healing up to the church where it belongs." "Master Sean," said Lord Darcy, "there is still a mystery here. We need more evidence. What about the eyes?" Master Sean blinked. "You mean the picture test, my lord?" "I do." "It won't stand up in court, my lord," said the sorcerer. "I'm aware of that," said Lord Darcy testily. "Eye test?" Dr. Patterley asked blankly. "I don't believe I understand." It's not often used, said Master Sean. It is a psychic phenomenon that sometimes occurs at the moment of death, especially a violent death. The violent emotional stress causes a sort of backfiring of the mind, if you see what I mean. As a result, the image in the mind of the dying person is returned to the retina. By using the proper sorcery, this image can be developed, and the last thing the dead man saw can be brought out. But it's a difficult process even under the best circumstances, and usually the conditions aren't right. In the first place, it doesn't always occur. It never occurs, for instance, when the person is expecting the attack. A man who is killed in a duel, or who's shot after facing the gun for several seconds, has time to adjust to the situation. Death must occur almost instantly. If he lingers, even for a few minutes, the effect is lost. And naturally, if the person's eyes are closed at the instant of death, nothing shows up. Count Devereux's eyes weren't open, Dr. Paddley said. They were still open when we found him. How long after death does the image remain? Until the cells of the retina die and lose their identity. Rarely more than 24 hours, usually much less. It hasn't been 24 hours yet, said Lord Darcy, and there is still a chance that the Count was taken completely by surprise. I must admit, my lord, Master Sean said thoughtfully, that the conditions seem favorable. I shall attempt it, but don't put any hope on it, my lord. I shan't. Just do your best, Master Sean. If there is a sorcerer in practice who can do the job, it is you. Thank you, my lord. I'll get busy on it right away, said the sorcerer with a subdued glow of pride. 2 hours later, Lord Darcy was striding down the corridor of the great hall, Master Sean following up as best he could, his Carothane wood staff in one hand and his big carpet bag in the other. He had asked Father Bright and the Countess Devereux to meet him in one of the smaller guest rooms. But the Countess came to meet him. "My Lord Darcy," she said, her plain face looking worried and unhappy. "Is it true that you suspect Laird and Lady Duncan of this murder? Because if so, I must..." "No longer, my lady," Lord Duncan cut her off quickly. "I think we can show that neither is guilty of murder, although, of course, the black magic charge must still be held against Laird Duncan." "I understand," she said, "but..." "Please, my lady," Lord Darcy interrupted again. "Let me explain everything. Come." Without another word, she turned and led the way to the room where Father Bright was waiting. The priest stood waiting, his face showing tenseness. "Please," said Lord Darcy, "sit down, both of you. This won't take long. My lady, may Master Sean make use of that table over there?" "Certainly, my lord," the Countess said softly. "Certainly." "Thank you, my lady. Please sit down. This won't take long, please." With apparent reluctance, Father Bright and my lady the Countess sat down in 2 chairs facing Lord Darcy. They paid little attention to what Master Sean O'Loughlin was doing. Their eyes were on Lord Darcy. "Conducting an investigation of this sort is not an easy thing," he began carefully. "Most murder cases could be easily solved by your chief man-at-arms. We find that well-trained county police, in by far the majority of cases, can solve the mystery easily. And in most cases there is very little mystery. But by His Imperial Majesty's law, the chief man-at-arms must call in a Duke's investigator if the crime is insoluble or if it involves a member of the aristocracy. For that reason, you were perfectly correct to call His Highness the Duke as soon as murder had been discovered." He leaned back in his chair. "And it has been clear from the first that my lord the late Count was murdered." Father Bright started to say something, but Lord Darcy cut him off before he could speak. "By murder, Reverend Father, I mean that he did not die a natural death, by disease or heart trouble or accident or what have you. I should perhaps use the word homicide. Now the question we have been called upon to answer is simply this. Who was responsible for the homicide? The priest and the Countess remained silent, looking at Lord Darcy as though he were some sort of divinely inspired oracle. As you know, pardon me, my lady, if I am blunt, the late Count was somewhat of a playboy. No, I will make that stronger. He was a satyr, a lecker. He was a man with a sexual obsession. For such a man, if he indulges in his passions, which the late Count most certainly did, there is usually but one end. Unless he is a man who has a winsome personality, which he did not, there will be someone who will hate him enough to kill him. Such a man inevitably leaves behind him a trail of wronged women and wronged men. One such person may kill him. One such person did. But we must find the person who did and determine the extent of his or her guilt. That is my purpose. Now as to the facts. We know that Edward had a secret stairway which led directly to his suite. Actually, the secret was poorly kept. There were many women, common and noble, who knew of the existence of that stairway and knew how to enter it. If Edward left the lower door unlocked, anyone could come up that stairway. He has another lock in the door of his bedroom, so only someone who was invited could come in. Even if she or he could get into the stairway, he was protected. Now here is what actually happened that night. I have evidence, by the way, and I have the confessions of both Laird and Lady Duncan. I will explain how I got those confessions in a moment. Primus. Lady Duncan had an assignation with Count Devereux last night. She went up the stairway to his room. She was carrying with her a small pistol. She had had an affair with Edward, and she had been rebuffed. She was furious, but she went to his room. He was drunk when she arrived, in one of the nasty moods with which both of you are familiar. She pleaded with him to accept her again as his mistress. He refused. According to Lady Duncan, he said, "I don't want you. You're not fit to be in the same room with her." The emphasis is Lady Duncan's, not my own. Furious, she drew a gun, the little pistol which killed him. The Countess gasped, "But Mary couldn't have?" "Please," Lord Darcy slammed the palm of his hand on the arm of his chair with an explosive sound. "My lady, you will listen to what I have to say." He was taking a devil of a chance, he knew. The Countess was his hostess and had every right to exercise her prerogatives. But Lord Darcy was counting on the fact that she had been under Count Devereux's influence so long that it would take her a little time to realize that she no longer had to knuckle under to the will of a man who shouted at her. He was right. She became silent. Father Bright turned to her quickly and said, "Please, my daughter, wait." "Your pardon, my lady," Lord Darcy continued smoothly. "I was about to explain to you why I know Lady Duncan could not have killed your brother. There is the matter of the dress. We are certain that the gown that was found in Edward's closet was worn by the killer. And that gown could not possibly have fit Lady Duncan. She's much too, hefty. She has told me her story, and for reasons I will give you later, I believe it. When she pointed the gun at your brother, she really had no intention of killing him. She had no intention of pulling the trigger. Your brother knew this. He lashed out and slapped the side of her head. She dropped the pistol and fell, sobbing, to the floor. Took her roughly by the arm and escorted her down the stairway. He threw her out. Lady Duncan, hysterical, ran to her husband. And then, When he had succeeded in calming her down a bit, she realized the position she was in. She knew that Laird Duncan was a violent, warped man, very similar to Edward, Count Devereux. She dared not tell the truth, but she had to tell him something, so she lied. She told him that Edward had asked her up in order to tell her something of importance. That something of importance concerned Laird Duncan's safety. That the Count told her that he knew of Laird Duncan's dabbling in black magic, that he threatened to inform church authorities on Laird Duncan unless she submitted to his desires, that she had struggled with him and ran away. Lord Darcy spread his hands. This was, of course, a tissue of lies, but Laird Duncan believed everything. So great was his ego that he could not believe in her infidelity, although he has been paralyzed for 5 years. How can you be certain that Lady Duncan told the truth? Father Bright asked warily. Aside from the matter of the gown, which Count Devereux kept only for women of the common class, not the aristocracy, we have the testimony of the actions of Laird Duncan himself. We come then to Secundus. Laird Duncan could not have committed the murder physically. How could a man who was confined to a wheelchair go up that flight of stairs? I submitted to you that it would have been physically impossible. The possibility that he has been pretending all these years and that he is actually capable of walking was disproved 3 hours ago, when he actually injured himself by trying to throttle me. His legs are incapable of carrying him even one step, much less carrying him to the top of that stairway. Lord Darcy folded his hands complacently. There remains, said Father Bright, the possibility that Laird Duncan killed Count Devereux by magical means. Lord Darcy nodded. That is indeed possible, Reverend Sir, as we both know, but not in this instance. Master Sean assures me, and I am certain that you will concur, that a man killed by sorcery, by black magic, dies of internal malfunction, not of a bullet through the heart. In effect, the black sorcerer induces his enemy to kill himself by psychosomatic means. He dies by what is technically known as psychic induction. Master Sean informs me that the commonest and crudest method of doing this is by the so-called simulacrum induction method. That is, by the making of an image, usually, but not necessarily of wax, and using the law of similarity inducing death. The law of contagion is also used, since the fingernails, hair, spittle, and so on of the victim are usually incorporated into the image. Am I correct, Father? The priest nodded. Yes, and contrary to the heresies of certain materialists, it is not at all necessary that the victim be informed of the operation, although, admittedly, it can, in certain circumstances, aid the process. Exactly, said Lord Darcy. But it is well known that material objects can be moved by a component sorcerer, black or white. Would you explain to my lady the Countess why her brother could not have been killed in that manner? Father Bright touched his lips with the tip of his tongue and then turned to the girl sitting next to him. There is a lack of relevancy. In this case, the bullet must have been relevant either to the heart or to the gun. To have traveled with a velocity great enough to penetrate, the relevancy to the heart must have been greater than the relevancy to the gun. Yet the test, witnessed by myself, that was performed by Master Sean, indicates that this was not so. The bullet returned to the gun, not to your brother's heart. The evidence, my dear, is conclusive that the bullet was propelled by purely physical means and was propelled from the gun. Then what was it Laird Duncan did? The Countess asked. Tertius, said Lord Darcy. Believing what his wife had told him, Laird Duncan flew into a rage. He determined to kill your brother. He used an induction spell, but the spell backfired and almost killed him. There are analogies on a material plane. If one adds mineral spirits and air to a fire, the fire will be increased. But if one adds ash, the fire will be put out. In a similar manner, if one attacks a living being psychically, it will die. But if one attacks a dead thing in such a manner, the psychic energy will be absorbed to the detriment of the person who has used it. In theory, we could charge Laird Duncan with attempted murder, for there is no doubt that he did attempt to kill your brother, my lady. But your brother was already dead at the time. The resultant dissipation of psychic energy rendered Laird Duncan unconscious for several hours, during which Lady Duncan waited in suspenseful fear. Finally, when Laird Duncan regained consciousness, he realized what had happened. He knew that your brother was already dead when he attempted the spell. He thought, therefore, that Lady Duncan had killed the Count. On the other hand, Lady Duncan was perfectly well aware that she had left Edward alive and well, so she thought the black magic of her husband had killed her erstwhile lover. Each was trying to protect the other, Father Bright said. Neither is completely evil, then. There may be something we can do for Laird Duncan. I won't know about that, Father, Lord Darcy said. The healing art is the Church's business, not mine. He realized with some amusement that he was paraphrasing Dr. Paddley. Where Laird Duncan had not known, he went on quickly, was that his wife had taken a gun up to the Count's bedroom. That put a rather different light on her visit, you see. That's why he flew into such a towering rage at me, not because I was accusing him or his wife of murder, but because I had cast doubt on his wife's behavior. He turned his head to look at the table where the Irish sorcerer was working. Ready, Master Sean? Aye, my lord. All I have to do is set up the screen and light the lantern in the projector. Go ahead, then. He looked back at Father Bright and the Countess. Master Sean has a rather interesting lantern slide I want you to look at. The most successful development I have ever made, if I may say so, my lord, the sorcerer said. Proceed. Master Sean opened the shutter on the projector, and a picture sprang into being on the screen. There were gasps from Father Bright and the Countess. It was a woman. She was wearing the gown that had hung in the Count's closet. A button had been torn off, and the gown gaped open. Her right hand was almost completely obscured by a dense cloud of smoke. Obviously, she had just fired a pistol directly at the onlooker. But that was not what had caused the gasps. The girl was beautiful, gloriously, ravishingly beautiful. It was not a delicate beauty. There was nothing flower-like or peaceful in it. It was a beauty that could have but one effect on a normal human male. She was the most physically desirable woman one could imagine. Retro mea santeras, Father Bright thought wryly. She's almost obscenely beautiful. Only the Countess was unaffected by the desirability of the image. She saw only the startling beauty. Has neither of you seen that woman before? I thought not, said Lord Darcy. Nor had Laird or Lady Duncan, nor Sir Pierre. Who is she? We don't know. But we can make a few deductions. She must have come to the Count's room by appointment. This is quite obviously the woman Edward mentioned to Lady Duncan. The woman, the she, that the Scots noblewoman could not compare with. It is almost certainly that she is a commoner. Otherwise she would not be wearing a robe from the Count's collection. She must have changed right there in the bedroom. Then she and the Count quarreled. About what? We do not know. The Count had previously taken Lady Duncan's pistol away from her, and had evidently carelessly left it lay on that table you see behind the girl. She grabbed it and shot him. Then she changed clothes again, hung up the robe, and ran away. No one saw her come or go. The Count had designed the stairway for just that purpose. Oh, we'll find her, Never fear, now that we know what she looks like. At any rate, Lord Darcy concluded, the mystery is now solved to my complete satisfaction, and I shall so report to His Highness. Richard, Duke of Normandy, poured 2 liberal portions of excellent brandy into a pair of crystal goblets. There was a smile of satisfaction on his youthful face as he handed one of the goblets to Lord Darcy. "Very well done, my lord," he said. "Very well done." "I am gratified to hear your Highness say so," said Lord Darcy, accepting the brandy. "But how were you so certain that it was not someone from outside the castle? Anyone could have come in through the main gate. That's always open." "True, your Highness, but the door at the foot of the stairway was locked. Count Devereux had locked it after he threw Lady Duncan out. There is no way of locking or unlocking it from the outside. The door had not been forced. No one could have come in that way, nor left that way, after Lady Duncan was so forcibly ejected. The only other way into the Count's suite was by the other door, and that door was unlocked." "I see," said Duke Richard. "I wonder why she went up there in the first place." "Probably because he asked her to. Any other woman would have known what she was getting into if she accepted an invitation to Count Devereux's suite." The Duke's handsome face darkened. "No, one would hardly expect that sort of thing from one's own brother. She was perfectly justified in shooting him." "Perfectly, your Highness. And had she been anyone but the heiress, she would undoubtedly have confessed immediately. Indeed, it was all I could do to keep her from confessing to me when she thought I was going to charge the Duncans with the killing. But she knew that it was necessary to preserve the reputation of her brother and herself, not as private persons, but as Count and Countess, as officers of the government of His Imperial Majesty the King. For a man to be known as a rake is one thing. Most people don't call about that sort of thing in a public official so long as he does his duty and does it well, which, as your Highness knows, the Count did. But to be shot to death while attempting to assault his own sister, that is quite another thing. She was perfectly justified in attempting to cover it up, and she will remain silent unless someone else is accused of the crime." "Which of course will not happen," said Duke Richard. He sipped at the brandy and then said, "She will make a good countess. She has the judgment, and she can keep her cool under duress. After she had shot her own brother, she might have panicked, but she didn't. How many women would have thought of simply taking off the damaged gown and putting on its duplicate from the closet?" "Very few," Lord Darcy agreed. "That's why I never mentioned that I knew the Count's wardrobe contained dresses identical to her own. By the way, your Highness, if any good healer like Father Bright had known of those duplicate dresses, he would have realized that the Count had a sexual obsession about his sister. He would have known that all the other women the Count were after were sister substitutes." "Yes, of course, and none of them measure up." He put his gauntlet on the table. "I shall inform the King, my brother, that I recommend the new Countess wholeheartedly. No word of this must be put down in writing, of course. You know, and I know, and the King must know. No one else must know." "One other knows," said Lord Darcy. "Who?" The Duke looked startled. "Father Bright." Duke Richard looked relieved. "Naturally. He won't tell her that we know, will he?" "I think Father Bright's discretion can be relied upon." In the dimness of the confessional, Alice, Countess Devereux, knelt and listened to the voice of Father Bright. "I shall not give you any penance, my child, for you have committed no sin. That is, insofar as the death of your brother is concerned. For the rest of your sins, you must read and memorize the 3rd chapter of The Soul and the World by St. James Huntington." He started to pronounce the absolution, but the Countess said, I don't understand one thing. That picture. That wasn't me. I never saw such a gorgeously beautiful girl in my life. And I'm so plain. I don't understand. Had you looked more closely, my child, you would have seen that the face did look like yours. Only it was idealized. When a subjective reality is made objective, distortions invariably show up. That is why such things cannot be accepted as evidence of objective reality in court. He paused. To put it another way, my child, beauty is in the eye of the beholder.
This has been a Colbycast episode.
This work is distributed under a Creative Commons Attribution, Non-Commercial, No Derivatives license. Share it, link it, blog it, talk about it. As Woody Guthrie said, this song is copyrighted in the U.S. under seal of copyright number 154085 for a period of 28 years, and anybody caught singing it without our permission will be a mighty good friend to ourn, cause we don't give a darn. Publish it, write it, sing it, swing to it, yodel it. We wrote it, that's all we wanted to do.